Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Richard South. I'm your host for today's Tea Break webinar. Hope you've all got a nice cup of tea handy. And this week, we're going to be trying to bring together some of the things that we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks in this webinar series, still focusing on the line bar pie template, and now just looking at a few tips and tricks for using that in the context of stories. So hopefully lots to useful tricks to share with you today. Just to remind you that the customer success team are available to you via the chat window as ever, so do please drop us a line there, either to say hello or to ask a question. We want to be as helpful as we can and help you make the most of your time today, so drop the guys a line. And as I said, what we're going to be doing today is focusing on stories. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Flourish stories now, but just a quick reminder, this gives you the ability to sequence together multiple visualizations in a slides type format, or to present different views on the same or similar visualizations, that being visualizations based on the same template, again, sequenced in a slides type format. And it's that latter use case we're mostly going to be focusing on today. And this is really important as it's going to allow you to progress beyond just interactive data visualization and charting to really telling stories with your data, helping your audience understand what's interesting within it, examining different elements of the data, and so on. And I'm going to walk through a few sort of simple examples. So the first thing to remember about Flourish stories is that they remember the state of a visualization. So you can set the state of a visualization in the story within an individual slide, and the story player is then going to remember that. And one very obvious area where we can then use this in the context of line bar pie template is for filters. And actually the first little example I'm going to show you is not about constructing a story in terms of a sequence of slides, but just a little trick for dealing with larger data sets. So here we're going to be looking at the World Bank GDP data we've looked at a couple of other times in this series. We've got a nice filter here so I can find the countries of interest to me and so on. But you'll see sort of flatly presented, Flourish has just picked the first 5 in our data set, and it's quite a strange mix of countries to be showing here. So we may not really want that to be the way we publish this visualization. So I'm just going to go into the Flourish app itself, just a little trick there to hop into that app.flourish.studio. And instead, I'm going to take this chart, and rather than publishing it as visualization, I'm going to push it into story mode. And here, I'm going to use this filter to pre-select some countries. And I'm just going to pick some countries that it might be sort of fairly sensible or reasonable to compare on a chart like this. So we'll just choose some relatively wealthy Western European countries here. So Italy, France, Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom. Now, what I'm also going to do, because I'm not presenting, as I said, a story in terms of a sequence of slides, it's just really the one visualization, is I'm going to go up here to the top left corner to navigation style default, and I'm just going to set that to none, okay? And that navigation at the top has disappeared. Now, when I publish this, publish to share and embed, let's just push that out live. Presented almost exactly the same as that standalone visualization. There's nothing really showing your audience that this is a story per se, but it's pre-filtered to a bit more sort of sensible data, and your user can then remove those and find the countries or regions of interest to them. So that can be a helpful little trick when dealing with larger data sets and wanting to pre-filter. Do that in stories mode. The other thing that filtering enables you to do is to walk your audience through different aspects of your data set and typically sort of narrate those point by point. So we're going to look here at another data set we've been using a lot, the UK energy output data set. And I'm just going to take this and push this into story mode. Here I've got a filterable legend, and it's a sort of single select filter. So what I might be wanting to do here is first tell my audience the story of the decline of coal, perhaps. Secondly, maybe the rise of bio and waste-based energy over the same time period. And then my third thing that I might want to show my user is that whole picture collectively. So the story player is remembering the state that you're leaving these filters and these controls in. And then when that's presented, it allows us to step our user through different insights within this, which is obviously just a single chart. So we can say something pertinent about the decline of coal, something pertinent and interesting about the rise of bio, and then something about the data set as a whole. So very nice and simple and easy to do that. What we can also do is we can sort of take that a step further. That was all obviously based on a single chart, but within a data set, as we've seen, there may be many interesting aspects, and we can use the story player to morph and animate between different visualizations based on this sort of same template. So I'm just going to open up another version of that UK energy chart. So there it is. And perhaps I might want to start off presenting the data to my audience in this format. It's nice conventional charting format. I think my audience is going to be familiar and comfortable with it. Let me just duplicate this so I don't sort of mess up any of my other data sets. So I'm going to duplicate that. I've got a copy of that. I'm going to now create a duplicate, and I'm going to switch this into maybe our new stream graph mode here, which I think really nicely shows obviously the overall decline in total energy output, as well as some of those proportional changes. So that's going to be my second view that I want to present to my audience. And then I'm going to duplicate this further because I think there's probably another aspect to this data that's quite interesting, which is to examine those individual trends for each category in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to break now my third copy of this chart into a grid of charts mode. So there we go, grid of charts, and I'm going to switch back to a line chart there. And then using a little trick that Lindsay showed in a previous week's webinar, here I'm going to make it so that we don't have the same y-axis across the grid. So at the moment, we have got the same y-axis here. So it's a little difficult, obviously, to see the trend clearly for wind, solar, and hydro because our figures are so much lower than they are for petroleum. So let's have different axes across the grid. And now we can pick out those individual trends within each category a little bit more clearly. Now what happens when I can push this into story mode is I'm going to take that chart, and I'm going to go new slide, and I'm just going to pull up those other two charts I was working on. So that was the stream graph. And then if I go 3 back, we're going to have the line chart that I started with. And now let's pop these into order. So then we want this one last. And let me just open that up now in this full screen preview window. So I can present my data, start by this conventional charting style, introducing the audience to the data set. Then we can morph into a different view, focus on another aspect of this and the proportional amounts, which we can now sort of see more clearly in the changes within those proportions. And then the third aspect of my data, again, Flourish morphs between those various chart types, and we can present a third view here, seeing trends more clearly. And one thing that you'll sort of see across the demos that I'm presenting is it's often very straightforward to work with Flourish if you almost think of your chart as creating a single master chart, which you're going to get all your styling exactly right and so on. And then often it's quite easy to duplicate that, and within those duplicates then make changes. So that's a sort of theme that you may spot. I'm going to show you that again here. A little kind of hack, if you like, to create a sort of playthrough type effect on time series data. And that's using min-max settings on your x-axis. And this is going to allow you to sort of sequence together views on your complete timeline in sequences. And if you have an accompanying narrative flow that you want to explain with that, this can be a useful way of doing it. So here we are looking at that energy trends chart as a stream chart, and I'm now going to create some duplicates of it. So this is going to be my final view, my entire data series. So I'm just going to put a duplicate, and then if you like, the view that precedes that, I'm going to say perhaps I've got a different trend maybe here in 2011. So I think we've got fairly stable up to about 2001, quite a steep decline until 2011, and then relatively stable in total terms for that final period. So here, this version of the chart, I'm going to go to x-axis, and I'm just going to set a maximum date to 2011, and you'll now see that chart shorten there. Okay, so that's going to be my second view, and then I'm just going to duplicate this again. And then we'll maybe start, we'll close off this one at 2002. So same thing, open up my x-axis settings, set a max date to 2002. You'll see that chart shorten again, so fairly stable this period here. And I'm now going to push this into story mode, and I'm going to use my 3 charts together. So push that into story mode. That's going to be my first view. My second view, we're going to expand that period out, and that was going to be the second one that I worked on. And then let's do a third view. And my third view is effectively going to be that master, that one that I started on, which had my whole time series. Oh, it looks like we've got the wrong chart there. That's kind of annoying. Let's just fix that fairly quickly. I think the quickest way for me to fix that is this. I'm just going to create another duplicate of that. And on this version, we'll just get rid of that completely. So I'll just call this full. It's going to be a bit easier for me to spot. Let's just refresh that so we know to look for a new slide, delete that final one, and then go have a look there. And there's my full version. Okay, that looks right. Now let's open that up, and just to show you the nice effect that you can kind of create here. So again, if we are wanting to align our narrative points to various different elements within a timeline, you might start with something like this, talk about the trends that we're seeing in this period, 95 to 2002. Then there are differing trends in the next period that we look at, as we now sort of start to see this decline in overall energy output. That's clearly quite significant across this period. Then our third view, we open up to see that full element of the timeline, and we can now talk about this more recent period over the last decade, where energy output has very much sort of stabilized in overall terms, but we can see those trends changing. So nice little trick there for playing along a timeline and engaging your audience with various different aspects of that timeline. Next, I wanted to share some quick ideas for you on using color within your visualizations and how that might work within story mode. So let's start off with picking out a particular aspect within our data set. So here, we've got that same stream graph, and perhaps what I want to do is move from a view where I look at it in this context to perhaps focusing my audience's attention on specifically coal and how that's declined in overall terms. So let me just start off with a quick dupe. So there we go. So I'm ready to go here. And what I want to do here is in my color palette, I'm just going to grab the color for coal. And let me just create another duplicate so I don't get into any problems here. So what I want to do is I want to grab my color for coal. So I'm going to do that because I want to retain that color. And that's in my clipboard now. And I'm just going to get rid of all these other colors, and you can see I've put into my color palette just a sort of fairly flat or neutral gray here. So we're de-emphasizing all of these others. You know, you could choose a series of grays. We could choose a lighter color. I just want to de-emphasize everything else. And then I want to use my custom overrides here to emphasize coal. So I'm just going to type in coal and then a colon, and I'm going to paste that color that we're using for coal there. And now let's use this here in story mode. and you can see the effect that we can achieve. So we're just pushing a new slide. If I go here, now I should have my full colors version. And so a nice way that we can use a color-based transition here. So here's my full data set and the overall picture. But next I want to focus my audience specifically on what's going on in coal. So as I transition, it's actually an animation of a color fade. We fade all those other categories to that neutral gray color. They're de-emphasized, and our audience is now focusing specifically on what's happening within coal. So just another variant on that, a different way to track colors is in this example. So we've got a bar chart with various countries. I'd just like to point out that all these metrics are completely made up, and there isn't, we're not using any real data set for hummability of national anthem or difficulty of language. So don't take umbrage if your national anthem isn't rated as highly as you feel it should be. This obviously sort of looks very pretty, and if our intent is just to allow the audience to search through these various different metrics that we have, this might be all right. But in the context of a story or a narrative, we may be wanting to do something like compare a single country's performance across these different categories, and that's going to be quite difficult to do. It's hard to pick out any particular one of these and see where it's moving from and to. So what I'd like to do here, if I want to tell the story of, say, Canada, is I'm going to do something similar. I am going to pick a nice vivid color from my color palette and put that in my clipboard. So I use that yellow, and I'm going to get rid again of all these different colors here. You'll see those fade to gray. And now I'm going to type in here Canada, and we'll pick that out. There we go, we'll pick that out there. Now, when I push this into story mode, what this means is if what's interesting in my data set is I want to compare my ratings for the overall awesomeness of Canada, scoring very highly here, to something else, maybe the quality of Canada's flag. Let's see how highly that rates and whether we're really into maple leaves or not. It now becomes very easy to follow the transition of Canada. And let's just do one more. Let's make that the hummability of the national anthem. So now in story mode, if our narrative is about the performance specifically of Canada across various metrics and how it sits in this other league table of these other countries, just by using this color trick now compared to that jumble that we saw before, it becomes much more sort of straightforward to pick out Canada across these. So a couple of ideas for you there in terms of color. And then just a couple of other sort of minor tips. I'm not going to go through the sort of creation of this, but again, sort of on a theme of if you've got complicated but interesting data, the story mode gives you lots of ways of stepping your audience through that and making points that either elucidate parts of your data or explain what's going on. So this can work quite nicely in terms of dual axis charts. So I'm going to quickly show you that, but also in terms of things like annotation. So here, actually, a new data set. This is UK COVID cases versus hospital admissions. So this is something that we might quite commonly see on a dual axis chart like this. So we'll start off with new cases. Obviously, many of you will be familiar with this data. And if we want to actually really sort of pick out and force the audience to think about what our data is showing to us, we can do that within the context of a dual axis chart. But why not do these two things separately so the audience has time to absorb the quite interesting sort of pattern that we see, which is obviously lots of cases and lots of hospital admissions in March and April of this year. We've now seen very high rise in cases. We're above March levels, but we're not seeing corresponding levels of hospital admissions. So just drawing that out, I think, allows the audience to absorb that point, and ideally we'd be marrying this with narrative here in the top section. Similarly, we might be wanting to mark points along the timeline, talk about the initial lockdown here. Obviously, a huge amount of narrative that we could be providing there, or in terms of annotations, various different points along those timelines. So just stepping through your data, allowing you to both explain it and for your audience to absorb that information. And then in the terms of the way that's created, I'm just going to open up that final version. Very sort of similar to what we saw previously. So this, if you like, we can call my master. So this is my final visualization with all my points on it. Might be a bit overwhelming to present all this just as a single sort of static view on a chart, which is why I would use a sort of story mode. And now to get this ready for that sort of story mode with those transitions, all I'm going to do is create a duplicate. Obviously, I've prepared this all already, so I can go into annotations, and I'm just going to get rid of the last annotation there on the line. That's that one. And then let's do one more duplicate. I won't go through all of this. Sure, you'll get the idea. Let's just take off another one of these. So there we go. Now, if we go into story mode, we can do that one first. Then let's do a new slide. And we'll do the second one. And another new slide. And we'll do the third one, which is the one I quickly called master. And now quite easy to step through. So as you can see, once you have created that sort of final visualization, if there are multiple things that you want to step through in stages, it's quite easy to sort of strip them back one by one, duplicating that final piece, and then present that as a in a stories mode rather than just a standalone visualization. Okay, so a couple of little treats to end on, sort of sneak preview time. We like to sort of give you something that you won't be able to get anywhere else other than this webinar. So two small things for you here today. One is something a lot of customers have asked us about, so we wanted to show you that we've been working hard on, which is improved line labels functionality, and we can see that sort of being previewed here. So just thought I'd give you an example of that in action. So here's where it is currently in Flourish. This is on my GDP World Bank data set. And you can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner and over here as well, some issues with overlapping labels. So Flourish developers have been working super hard to bring some magic to this and to sort this problem out. So in the not yet released future version of this template, but coming very soon, that will now look like that, where essentially you've got a collision detection algorithm that's separating those out and lots of additional options for how you style those. So hopefully just a nice little minor improvement to look forward to there. And then something that I showed in a sneak preview, I think a couple of weeks ago, was that annotations were also coming to Linebar Pi template. So they're not yet released, but they're getting ever closer as we work through a final few bugs and UX improvements. And seeing as annotations will actually be being implemented via the story editor, I thought I'd give you a quick idea of how that might look in action. So I've got some new data for this. So this is Google Trends data on what people are searching for in the UK. And because I'm a Liverpool FC fan, I've chosen Boris Johnson, Liverpool FC, and lockdown, slightly unusual data set, but gives us some quite interesting things we can play around with. So there's my chart. It's ready to go. I'm now going to push this into story mode. And on this preview version, so not available to you yet, when I do push it into story mode, I get this little pencil here, and this is the annotation section. So I'm going to open that out in its own panel, and it says select an annotation or create a new annotation by clicking anywhere in the visualization. Okay, so what do I want to say about this? Well, here I can see we've got a peak, and this peak is UK enters lockdown. So we can do that there. Now what I can do is I can change the text size, make it bigger, smaller, and so on. Let's just leave that there, or the font weight. and so on. I can change my marker. Do I want any marker at all? A little dot, I think I'm going to have none. I can have a connector or not a connector. Let's have a step connector and maybe a little arrow. So that's UK enters lockdown. Then what I can do is I can drag this guy around. Like I probably don't want to put him there. It's pretty cluttered, a bit weird to put it there. Let's put it over here where there's a bit of room. And then I can drag this little guy around to make sure he's pointing to the right place. Now what I'm going to do is here, I'm just going to duplicate that because I like that style. And I've got another one, so let's put that over here. And then if I just grab this, you just need to play around to make sure this all stays on my chart. This is going to be Boris goes into intensive care. And obviously a big peak of interest there. I can change the text width here. So that's going to squash that down or make it a bit longer if I want. Maybe I want that all on one line. I'm just going to push that there. I can continue annotating this out. I've got various annotation types. And obviously, if I also want to sort of step my users through this, then I can do so by creating a second slide. So maybe my first one is going to be that. Then I create a duplicate of that. And now let's just add a couple more annotations. So there we go. Oh. Let's have you going, oh, start a new one there. So let's have this going off this way and pointing over here. I need my little hand to be showing. So this is UK readies for second lockdown, I guess is my annotation here. And most important of all, let's do another copy because what we don't want to miss out on is this point here. And let's get that down there, I guess, which is Liverpool win the league. Very important for 2020. Oh, there we go, Liverpool win the league. And now we can push that out to publish that. Here's my chart with annotations. And if I want, I can step through different points on there. So a little preview there of how annotations will be working when it's released. All right, that's right on the half-hour mark. So I think I've timed that quite well this week. I hope that's been useful for you. I hope it sparked a few ideas and given you a few useful hints on how to execute some of those ideas. Do hope you'll really be making the most of sort of story mode with your charts, and it encourages you to think about sort of different aspects and different insights within your data. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I can see that the team have answered off various questions. So let me just